Do you want those big damages or big HPSs, but mostly about big damages? Then, my friend, you will need to learn how to sim. Now, I know some of you already know this, but some of you might not know how to sim, and unfortunately, the state of the game is to a point where you cannot really know what the best item for you is unless you sim. And if you want that big extra number, if you want to make your character as perfect as possible, as min-maxy as possible, your ass needs to sim. Now, what is simming? Well, sim is short for simulating, which is a way in which you can run, let's say, a math calculation on your character to see how much damage it can put out. So you know, like, what are the limits of your character, how well you're doing as opposed to how well you should be doing, and things like this. This is a similar concept that you might find in other games as well. And simming essentially is taking your character's data, running it through a simulated fight, and giving you the result as to what is the best situation that your character can come up with in that type of scenario. When you sim, you essentially tell your PC to say, okay, I'm fighting that target. If I press all of my abilities in the best optimal way, how much damage will I be able to do in that situation? And what tells the calculator what best abilities are to be used are basically the theory crafters of each individual spec that work on the simulating platform and know exactly what is the best possible rotation that you can be doing, and of course it will give you an end result. Now, the way you sim is fairly simple. We've already covered the starting point of it in pretty much all of our guides, but also in our add-ons video, which you can check. But the first thing that you need to do is get the Simulation Craft add-on through whatever platform you use. We recommend CurseForge, of course. You can check the add-ons video that we have. The link will be down in the description, and get that Simulation Craft add-on. Now, once you have the Simulation Craft add-on, you can go into your game, log in on your character, whatever talent setup you have, whatever gear you have equipped, that will be what's going to be taken into consideration. You will press enter, type /sim_c. You can see it down in the bottom in the text. Press enter, and you will get this little window with all of this text already selected. This is essentially all of your character's details in terms of gear, stats, talents, covenants, legendaries equipped, what you have in your bags as well, all neatly compiled in this text. If you actually take the time to read it, you'll essentially figure it out. It's not that complicated to understand that this is the neck ID is probably the ID of the number of the item that's in the WoW's database, and then it takes it all into consideration. So what you do essentially is you copy all of this. You can press Ctrl+C, it's already selected, or you can press Ctrl+A, select all of it, and then press Ctrl+C. And that's it. After you have this, you go to the next part of the simulation process. And that is on Raidbots.com. This is basically the best platform to sim at the moment. There are others as well, and especially others that influence this platform coming about. And you can see once you get here, you can either log in or not. I personally have an account. That makes it a little bit more convenient to sim, and you can choose what exactly you want to sim. Most of the time you'll go to top gear, and we can take a look at this one for now. And now you have to load from SimC add-on. It already tells you this is where you Ctrl+V, right? Or if you really want to, you can right click, paste in it, okay? And your character's details will be loaded here. As you can see, this is my hunter with all of the items that I have equipped, all of the conduits that I have, talents, and everything like that. All of it is here. I think there should be an option where you can also input it from the WoW Armory, but this is the best way to do it because this is the most accurate way to do it as well, and the way that we recommend. Now, first things first, what you will see here is that you can navigate to the sections of the simulation. We're just gonna take them one by one. In this specific encounter, we have Runecarver legendaries because we're playing Shadowlands. This feature has been added in Shadowlands where you can add more legendaries to sim. We're not gonna do that right now, but we're gonna look at the gear that I have. As you can see, these are all the neck pieces that I have, most of them in, well, all of them in the bags except for this one, which is selected that I have equipped. I have a chest piece that I just looted from the vault, which is in my bags, but it's 252 as opposed to the 226 halberd that I already have because it has the gem socket. And this is something that we can actually sim. So I'm gonna click this, and I want to see if this chest piece will be good whatsoever. You have wrists, backs, hands, waists, legs, feet, rings, and so on with all the rings and all the things I have. the weapon, and once you're done with this, you're done with the gear. Now you can look at enchants, because we do say in all of our guides, make sure you can also sim your consumables, which is very important. You can sim the enchants. Specifically, since I'm simming a chest piece, I will add a chest enchant. I don't know which one is better, so I'm gonna select both. And I want the simulation, the script, to tell me, okay, which one is better, Eternal Skirmish or Eternal Stats. You can go for gems as well, you can go for shards as well. Obviously, this chest piece that I have does not have a shard of domination, but you can obviously select as many shards as you want. These are obviously at different eye level, different rank rather, that basically influences their bonus, and you can sim those as well. Right now, I am going to be simming Kyrian. You can also unlock all of the soul mines. Let's say you haven't finished your campaign and everything, or haven't unlocked all of your conduits at every specific eye level. You can essentially unlock all of these. I, for instance, can put in Pelagos as well as a soul bind to sim, or Clea as well. Or I can go to all of the soul binds from all of the other covenants if I so desire to sim. Also, what soul bind would be best for me. I personally know that Forge Light Prime Mechanicals will be the one that I want to sim anyway, because I don't want to change from it, so I don't care about all the other stuff. Obviously, I'm simming the conduits as well. I just know for a fact that these conduits are the best, but you can add and sim as many conduits as you want. I'm just gonna not select them so that I can have a quicker result, because the more items you add, the slower the end result will be. If you see here at the bottom, you have iterations. Iterations basically are, each iteration is a possible encounter. Iteration number 1 can be the gear that I have. Iteration number 2 can be the gear that I have minus the chest that will be unlocked. Iteration number 2 can be a swap of talents, can be a swap of conduits, and so on and so forth, of enchants. So right now I'm currently sitting at 30,000 iterations. If you have the account in the subscription, you can go up to a maximum of more than 300,000. But let's say if I add another conduit, it will add another 60,000 iterations on top of it all, because it sims this against all of the other choices that I already have, right? But the smaller the number, the faster the result, and I just want to use that. I'm not gonna change any talents whatsoever, because you can obviously use all sorts of talent combinations, and you can see that iterations are going past the maximum limit. And these are all the talent combinations that the calculator will do to give you the best accurate number. I don't care about all of this. I only care about this talent situation. And we're gonna keep going down. This is the simulation option, which is also a part that's going to be very interesting for you. First of all, let's talk about these specific options. First of all, it's the fight style. This is mostly what's going to determine how accurate the result is. What are you actually simulating? You are simulating a patchwork fight. Patchwork means a boss in a raid that does not move, does not stop you from attacking, does not stop you from casting, does not force you to move at all. So it's basically kind of like a training dummy. So you select the fight that you have here. So let's say I want to sim my single target for a boss fight. I only have one target, one boss. I'm not gonna fight more than one bosses. The fight length is usually something that determines like how good the result is, because you kind of have to know how long the boss fight will last. Usually it's 5 to 6 minutes. The better gear that your raid is, the quicker the fight is, so you can adjust that later on. Let's leave it at 6 minutes, because that's usually kind of the length of a normal fight as you go into the raid for the first time. SimC version don't usually touch this as well. Now we look at consumables. Will this simulate you having weapon oil, or will you have shaded sharpening stones or things like that? We're just gonna leave the default option, and then it's going to simulate the shard bonus. Now this is specific for Shadowlands, and this is a good example to talk about as well. The shard bonus is only active in raids, so if I let this tick, it will calculate the damage that I would do to a raid boss. If I untick it, it will calculate the damage that I would do in a dungeon boss, for instance. And let's just say with the talent setup that I have, that I want to calculate the dungeon boss, so I'm going to deactivate this. And obviously there are a couple of trinkets that you can individually change, so the system doesn't know exactly what stats you will have. So for instance, you have the Solia secret technique from Tazafesh dungeon, and it can have different types of stats depending on who you cast this on. Obviously, the simulation platform doesn't know who you're going to cast it on if you don't have it already casted. So you can just select haste, because haste just happens to be very good for survival. The same thing with Unbound Changeling proc, because it can proc any of the stats, right? So you can choose that whatever stat you want. Let's put haste as well, but I don't have any of these trinkets simulated, so it doesn't really matter. Same thing for the Quantum Device. As you know, this is one of the trinkets that has a lot of procs, a lot of weird procs that are not necessarily damage or stats, so you can add this as well, but I'm not using any of these trinkets, so they are not relevant rather. This is something more advanced that we're not going to talk in today, so you can ignore the custom APL section. And this is also something that we're not going to touch about report notifications options. Really, you're only interested in simulation options. And once you've set all of this up, that's it. You click find top gear, and now the essential script is going to run itself, and it will take a few moments to finish up. And now after the result has been done, we can see that the new chess piece is actually way better than before. And you can go over to all of the new changes. They're basically going to be highlighted to show you like what is better than what you already have. And the chess piece with the Eternal Skirmish, by the way, enchant is the best option for me. How much better is that though? Well, let's take a look. If you keep going down, you'll see all of the changes right here. And this is basically the same chest with the other enchant. Well, no, actually, this is the chest that we just simmed. This is basically giving me 94 extra DPS, right? This is what I equip. If I click it, I can see the difference. Equipping the new chest will give me 94 extra DPS, which is, in this context, pretty shit. The benefits of it would be that the chest is higher eye level, which means more armor and more stamina, making me a little bit tankier, whereas the damage probably won't change at all if I equip this, as opposed to keeping the one with the shard that I already have, which just goes to show you how powerful these new shards are, even in a context where the bonus is not currently active. If I enable the bonus, probably this chest would not have simmed good at all. Also, just a little side notes piece, since now we have empowered conduits. Right now, my empowered conduit is currently I believe Strength of the Pack is my empowered conduit, while if you change the enfeebled mark empowered conduit, like change my conduits into the empowered slot, will give me 4 extra damage. And then you know, the best option will be to still keep my empowered conduits the way they are with the new chest. And obviously, the more items you have, the more talents you change, the different types of fights that you have will give you different results. So let's actually take a look at all the other options that you have on Raidbots. We already looked at the top gear option. Let's take a look at the droptimizer, which is another really good option that you should go for. Again, we're going to have to load the character details from the game into the slot there, so you can just go back into the game, copy the details, paste them, and then we will have our character settings. Now, when we use droptimizer, we essentially take a look at the loot table in the game and see what items we should go for more damage. We can obviously take a look at like world quests and world bosses by clicking Shadowlands. We can take a look at the Tazafesh dungeon hard mode or normal mode. We can take a look at clearly the Sanctum of Domination raid or the dungeons as well, depending on what type of things we want. So let's make it simple and look at the Sanctum of Domination raid. I am currently a heroic raider, so there's no point in me looking at mythic loot. So right now, today, just so happens that I will be raiding with my guild. So I want to know what items would be the best to aim for. And obviously, if you click heroic, you can see all the loot table from heroic. Doesn't really matter. Once you click that, you just, again, what am I simming for? I'm simming again for Patchwork 1 boss. I can sim for more than one boss. Let's say right now I'm fighting Sylvanas, right? Sylvanas is one boss most of the time, although there are adds, and adds are important, right? We'll go into how to type to sim for adds as well, but we're going to keep it simple. And because I'm fighting Sylvanas, I will be including my Domination Shard set bonus. And then I'm going to be clicking Run Droptimizer, no other option needed, and we're going to have to wait once more for this to finish. And when the result is out, you can essentially check all of the items in each boss that will be essentially run against your current gear set and tell you what the difference in damage will be. For instance, the best loot that I can get from the raid, no questions asked, is the spear, which is obviously an eye level upgrade because I have the one from normal. I have the 226 Jotun Gears Destiny's Call, and obviously the 239 will be better, but it will be better than anything else that I can get from this raid. And that assumes Sylvanus's and Kel'Thuzad's higher eye level. And obviously this will increase my DPS by 46 to 182. It's these numbers you can take with a grain of salt because it depends on the situation, but it is definitely the best option that I can get. And you can look at all the other things. For instance, if I equip this ring, I will lose DPS, not a lot, but you know, all of these things will add against each other eventually. This is a really good showcase because if I equip this, I will lose my legendary effect. So in terms, I will lose 5.7% of my overall damage when all the other ones are at best 1 or 2% increments of damage gain or losses. So you can look at all of this, and obviously you can do the same for dungeons as well. Currently, if we look at the last damage DPS run that I had, I essentially had about 7k something DPS. Now with the new two-hander, it will add about 182 extra DPS, which is a lot for one specific item, not to mention it will add all of the bonus benefits of a bigger item, meaning more stamina and stuff like that. So this is the droptimizer. Next up, the gear compare is something that I don't particularly use very often, but you can definitely use it if you have a lot of loot. You can essentially create gear sets. You can have, for instance, in my case as survival, I could have a single target set or an AoE set, or a set that goes for one talent build, a set that goes for another talent build, and compare them against each other. The main idea remains the same, where you use the fight style and number of bosses and fight length and all of that to be appropriate for what encounter you want to simulate for. That is the gear set, gear compare. It's not something that I recommend you use at the beginning of your simming career. It's not that relevant. Most you're going to be spending time in top gear, droptimizer, and so on. And speaking of, talent compare is probably another thing that you want to get. If you think that your gear that you have is the best possible option currently, then you can just sim what talents are best in the situation. So for instance, the talents that I have are AoE talents. So let's just say okay, I want to sim Mongoose Bite, Birds of Prey, Steel Trap, and Viper's Venom, which are essentially my single target, although this one requires a specific legendary, against the build that I have. So this talent compare will already take into consideration the talents that you already have and the talents that you've selected to put into the list. And then again, you fight for single target or AoE, and then you slash compare, and you will get a result as to which talents will be the best. And after the talents are compared, we can basically see that the best talents for me to pick are essentially the ones that I already have selected, just because they match this legendary specifically. If I would have selected a different legendary, most likely this talent setup would have simmed a lot better, which it does sim about 500 to 600 extra DPS. I know for a fact for my character that would have simmed better. This is in terms of talent compare, and of course we have quick sim and stat weights. And for quick sim, I just went ahead and did another sim of my own, because basically it's the same situation. You paste your details here, you select the fight style, number of bosses, fight length, and we'll go over that in a bit, and then click run quick sim, and this just tells you exactly how much damage your character is able to do with the current setup in the current situation. This is what my character is simming at the moment, and more importantly, it shows you a breakdown of what abilities did the most amount of damage, so on and so forth. Again, we can show you the buff uptime for certain buffs if you want to track different things that you have, like the Predator buff or the Conduit buff or the Trinket procs or things like that. More importantly, the quick sim gives you access to a specific thing that is the ability log. This is basically the rotation that the sim used to generate this specific number. And the rotation can be something good for you to give you a sense of what to press in terms of situations, but also the rotation will most likely take into account the specific procs that it had during the time of that specific opener. So basically it tells me to pull at 0 seconds as soon as the combat starts with Serpent Sting, then put down Resonating Arrow, Coordinate Assault, use my weapon, pop Berserking, Potion, and then start with Wildfire, Raptor Strike, Flanking, Raptor Strike, and so on. And you can keep seeing, it tells you at what second it used any ability, what buffs you had active at the time, and you can keep going and keep going for all of those, what I think it was 6 minutes. what abilities it used. You can see when it pops cooldowns, what buffs you have, and so on. And it finished at 6 minutes and 49 seconds. The fight specifically. This is something that you can see in QuickSim, and it's very useful if you are unsure how good your rotation is. Obviously, this is not the correct rotation because differs for each spec, but for survival in particular, kill commands proc with reset, so I can get resets for kill command. Bombs change a little bit the playstyle that I have. Serpent Stings can sometimes proc if I use the Viper Venom talent. So all of these changes based on your spec. So you kind of have to understand a little bit how your spec works, what kind of procs you have, and this is something that you can track here. For instance, if you play Fire Mage, you're probably going to spam Fireball a bunch until you get the heated up, and then you're converting into Hot Streak. You can see when the sim considers is the best choice to convert it into Hot Streak, and that's when you can, you know, get a better idea of how to actually play your Fire Mage spec. And obviously this goes for each spec in particular. And past QuickSim, we have stat weights, which is another thing that you can do. Stat weights is a little bit weird, and I think I've already did a stat weight sim. Yep, there we go. Basically, it's a quick sim, but it shows your the value of your stats. What this essentially does, in a very crude way, it says that if I take my character right now and I add 1 point of critical strike, my DPS overall will increase by 1.74. Same thing for agility, haste, versatility, mastery, and so on. So, but once I add 1 point of critical strike, this entire situation that the stat weights are based on will change, because this takes in consideration the current amount of crit that I have, not the amount that I would get to get this damage. So essentially stat weights are not always relevant and trustworthy, because the more stats you have, the more these will change. So essentially you would have to do stat weight sims every time you added a flask buff, a food buff, or trinket swap, or ring swap, or anything like that, which is why we recommend instead that you do essentially top gear sims, or you know, gear compare sims to see exactly what is the best, because when you're looking at stat sims, you're essentially looking at what gear to pick between a pants with the same eye level but different stats than the ones that you already have. And now I mentioned about, we can close all of these off for the moment. We talked about, let's look at top gear again, the fight styles, and this is something that we're gonna go more into, and the top gear is also one of the best ways to see this. Okay, so right now I want to look at AoE fights, let's say, right? So I have the same gear. I know for a fact that this will be my best gear. I can change the chest like we looked at before, but that's not really that important. I'm gonna keep scrolling down to this particular section, fight style. Now there are a lot of fight styles here that might seem the ones that you would be looking for, but let's explain them a little bit. Dungeon sliced beta is a little bit different than what you would think. You would think that this is something that you would want to use in a dungeon, but you have to understand what this does. This essentially puts your character into a scenario, just like Patchwork did, where some specific things happen. Dungeon Slice essentially is a situation where you fight a small range of adds spawns in a small range of time, and adds come and go into the fight, which, you know, essentially doesn't always happen when you're in a dungeon, so it's not always relevant. Same thing can happen with Hectic Add Cleave, where you're essentially fighting a boss, but occasionally adds spawn during the boss fight. Light movement is what you would imagine, light movement, where you have to kind of move a little bit all the time. Heavy movement, well, again. And you have Execute Patchwork, essentially Patchwork fight, where you're in execute situations, which is probably important for specs like Warrior. For specs, even Hunter has Kill Shot, Shadow Priest has Twist of Fate, and so on and so forth. For instance, heavy movement is the same as Patchwork, but you'll have to move 20 to 30 yards every now and again, and these essentially change. Cleave Add, you can imagine as well. With the Cleave Add situation, you have one main boss, and then sometimes you have an off target that dies 60% of the time into the encounter, right? So it's not always up for the entire time. Maybe this can be good for, let's say, Sylvanas, but it's not really relevant, because if you want to make a sim that will tell you the best output situation, you kind of have to take into consideration all of it. And when it comes to AoE, it's difficult because this will probably be likely most in dungeons. You don't fight all the packs at the same time. Not all the tanks pull the packs when you have all the cooldowns up. Not all the tanks pull the same amount of mobs. Not all the dungeons have the same amount of packs, even if the tanks are consistent, right? So you kind of have to figure out exactly what is the situation that you want to perform the best in. So let's take a look at, for instance, Halls of Atonement, which is one of the best examples for this, because most of the time, especially in fortified weeks, you will start ideally in a high key by the pulling a lot and bloodlusting. So Halls of Atonement has what? 2 ads at the front that usually come in, 2 casters in the back, and a patrol to the right. And I think the patrol has a caster and 2 dogs, and there might be 2 additional mobs. So essentially we have 2, 4, 6, 8, maybe 9 total targets, right? So what we're gonna do, and what we recommend you do, is you go to Patchwork, and instead you select 9 bosses here, right? Because you would be fighting against targets. Supposedly you're not going to be moving very much. Maybe you're going to interrupt here and there or stun here and there, but you cannot really sim for that situation because that's very specific. That requires you to actually make a choice in that situation, and that choice always differs, so you cannot really account for everything. But we're going to say we're going to fight 9 packs, right? The fight is going to last how long? Maybe a minute, okay? Maybe at most, maybe a minute, right? And we're probably going to have more additional options. We're going to probably enable Bloodlust, which is something that we didn't talk before, is the more options here. We're definitely going to fight with Bloodlust. Do you have Vengeance Demon Hunter or Havoc Demon Hunter in your party? Then you enable Mystic Touch. Let's say we don't have it. Do you have a Mage, Arcane Intellect? But since I'm a survival hunter, that doesn't mean anything. Chaos Brand, again, for magic damage. Actually, Mystic Touch was a monk. I am sorry. Chaos Brand would be the Demon Hunter, 145% magic damage. Do you have the extra HP? Doesn't really matter anyway. Wind Fury Totem, do you have an enhancement? Not particularly. Do you have a Battle Shower Warrior? Let's say we don't have, but we do have the Bleeding from the Blood Seeker talent, which we will be running anyway. Now, you can sim what potions you want to use. Let's say I want to use the Agility Potion, which I will probably always be using on that pool. What food am I going to use? Probably the Haste food as a survival hunter. What flask of power, pretty much. Do I use an augmentation? I actually don't use augment runes, and that's about it. I don't have any of these trinkets, so they don't really matter. And then I click find top gear. And this is a good example. If you don't select any type of things to sim for, the add-on, the platform itself will tell you that you need to select at least 2 combinations so that it has something to compare you with. So let's say I want to sim Flanking Strike against Tip of the Spear, because Tip of the Spear is another AoE talent that you can take. Flanking Strike has a 30-second cooldown, meaning that I can use it potentially twice in that 1 minute fight. If the fight lasts for more than 1 minute, let's say 1 minute 15 or 1 minute 30, this will come off cooldown a 3rd time potentially, and I can use it once more. But this will only mean that I'll be using it only twice at the, let's say, 0-second mark or 30-second mark, or, you know, plus minus a few seconds here and there. So with this all selected, we can find the top gear and see exactly what we are dealing with. And the result is done. Let's see. I would be doing 46,000 DPS in that 1 minute span with all of the buffs and the best possible execution of my rotation. And Flanking Strike seems to be better than Tip of the Spear by 300 DPS. 300 can be a lot, but in the scope of 46,000 damage, 300 might not be that much. So if you don't want to be bothered by pressing Flanking Strike, or you feel like it's better to just press Raptor Strike every 3 stacks that you have, then you can go with Tip of the Spear. This will essentially help you sim for AoE situations, and hope with this you understand the difference between Patchwork, Hectic Ad, Cleave, Dungeon Slice, and so on. Although Dungeon Slice can be something good if you don't specifically know, if you're just starting doing dungeons and you don't know exactly what's going to happen, what are the dungeons, what your group is going to be like, you can get a very rough idea by just running Dungeon Slice. But once you've run the dungeons long enough and you know, okay, in this dungeon there are a couple of really big pulls that really matter for me to do as much damage as possible, you kind of know how many targets there are in, or you can just go for something very standard, like, okay, is it going to be, we can go back for Patchwork. Okay, my tank usually pulls about 5 targets. The fight usually lasts about 40 seconds or 30. You can put 40 or 20. 20 probably only lasts if you're doing a really low key, in which case, is it that really important to sim the best if they're gonna die that quick? Do you want them to die in 10 seconds? I mean, if they can die in 10 seconds, might as well do a higher key, right? So you can put 40 seconds. You can change all of this. Oh, usually my group runs with a with a monk and also with a demon hunter that are constantly active in combat and applying the debuffs to everything. So I want to sim that as well. And then you can sim again the talents. Maybe I want to sim Hydra's Bite this time, and then you just sim. This is just off the top, just to give you an idea. Obviously, since I'm only fighting 5 targets and not 9 targets, I'm going to have less damage overall, and this is where your class comes into play, because wildfire bombs for survival are not target capped. Okay, look, there's 36,000. Because the fight lasts shorter than because the fight is shorter in turn, the buffs and cooldowns that I have active consist of a bigger chunk of that time frame when I'm fighting than if the fight would last 1 minute. So that's why the damage is still pretty high, even though I'm fighting fewer targets. Again, flanking strike seems to be the best. Tip of the spear losing 4.8k. Oh, this is not tip of the spear. Hydra's Bite losing me 4.8k DPS if I would have played it instead of guerrilla tactics. So this is how you can tell exactly how good things are. And this is pretty much at least the beginning and intro course of how to sim your character and why to sim your character, which is something actually that we didn't talk. Why do you want to sim? Do you want to improve? Because this is what is actually important here. You don't have to sim if you just want to have fun, if you're perfectly fine with your performance, if you don't think you're holding your group back, if you don't care if you're holding your group back, in which case, naughty, naughty, naughty. But basically, simming is to give you an idea of what exactly is going on, what you could be doing better, what you're probably already doing good, to give you an idea of how to get to that extra level of performance, which personally and for people similar to me are interested in, because why not be better than you were a minute ago or a dungeon ago? Obviously, all of these sim take into consideration context, which is very important. What context are you in? Do you know your spec? Do you know, can you play your rotation perfectly? Do you have the right gear? Do you know exactly what the boss is, when the ads will spawn, how people are going to be using Bloodlust? Do you know when your raid is going to be using Bloodlust on a boss? Is it at start? Is it in the middle? Is it in an execute phase? All of these things are important to give you a more accurate response, an accurate result, because you can still sim and get like a general result, but you kind of have to think about what that means. And this comes into play with the type of sim that you do. Is it patchwork, or is it people like to do other sims than patchwork? Patchwork also, if you do the patchwork type fight style, you have to imagine that that result is for a situation where you never have to move or stop DPSing for any reasons, and when your procs are more or less perfect, and when you play your rotation perfectly. Because obviously there's RNG to the game, the results is always an average of all of the range of DPS. Let's say you have perfect procs, you do 10k DPS. If you have the worst types of procs, you do 5k, the result is probably going to be like 7.5, like something in between, right? That's the end result on Raidbots. And again, there's so much more to talk about than what we can fit into a video, and hope this was good enough for you to start simming. And if you have any other questions, you can hit us up in the Discord down below. You can go to the specific Discord community for your class and or spec and talk with the big 3 crafters there, because this is how you learn about stuff. This is how we learned about stuff. Because thank you to the Accurus DK boys that helped me understand simming a little bit better, because they actually helped putting this video down together. So if you're a DK, you can go check the Accurus Discord, because they have really good insights into how to make your spec play better. So thank you, boys, you rock. Thank you, dear patrons, for supporting the video. This is obviously a different kind of video. We were supposed to have a news episode today, but with nothing really happened, and most likely things will happen after we publish the video. So we're probably gonna postpone the news video afterwards. And if you, dear viewer, like this type of content and you want to support us a little bit more, check the link down below into the description for our Patreon page. Thank you for watching the video. See you next time.
I've been loving it then, I still love it now. Still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. Getting better every day, let me show you how. Cause still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. It's getting harder to stay, but at the end of the day, it's a guilty pleasure, so just log in and play. Whether it's classic or retail, I'ma do a /bow. Still, I play WoW.